Today, I want to talk about meta play, and I know that particularly in Overwatch, the word meta is not exactly something that many people like to hear. It is often associated with a restrictive type of mentality that forces us onto roles that we'd rather not play. In my experience, meta play in Overwatch evolved in kind of an unusual way. I mean, not entirely unusual, but suffice to say that in many other games, the word meta is not as hated as in Overwatch, and that's what I want to talk about today. In light of the fact that the Overwatch League is showing us new compositions that some ladder players would like to pick up, as well as keeping in mind that with more balance changes coming our way, we are going to live in an ever-evolving meta in Overwatch, I felt it was a good time to bring this up. But it seems like we are finally approaching a level that I would personally call acceptable. Don't get me wrong, I'm sure that once Mercy is nerfed, that's going to be another big thing that all of us want to complain about because it makes the game utterly unfun. That's what happened with the Beyblade meta, then with the tank meta, it happened again with the dive meta, and the Mercy meta again has been granted the label of worst meta to date. Can you tell that the word meta is going to be used a lot in this video? Well, we're going to be discussing all of that and more after a quick shout out in favor of my partner Humble Bundle. Their Humble monthly service delivers a pack of awesome games to you every month for just $12. Every bundle features early unlocks that you can play right away as you wait for the rest of your games to be sent out. You can cancel anytime and live happily knowing that every purchase using my link supports not only charity but also my channel with every new subscriber. So it is actually a pretty massive contribution if you do happen to like my content. At the time of making this video, the January bundle is only available for a couple more days, featuring Civilization 6 as well as Owlboy as its early unlocks. So if you don't want to miss out on those, hurry up and grab yourself a bunch of awesome games for only $12 by following the link in the description below. Just to make sure that we are all on the same page, what exactly is a meta? Meta play is an individual's or an entire community's attempt of finding the most optimal way of achieving their goal. In our case, that goal will be winning our match. In an attempt of finding the path of least resistance, players often go out of their way to even doing things that almost defy the point of playing the game in the first place, which would be to have fun. Meta play is all about finding the most optimal way to guarantee victory with the least amount of effort, so you can be pretty sure that if something is considered meta, that thing has proven to be working. The way meta play has evolved in Overwatch is definitely a bit curious. It was often defined specifically by balance patches that put some heroes above others when it comes to their effort to value ratio. That simply means that by buffing a hero too much, they would be put into a place where you have to invest less effort into your gameplay to get the same result as on other heroes, which would be winning. But also nerfing heroes can cause this kind of imbalance where the only reason something was not considered meta was because it's been countered by something else. I mean, imagine how much more broken Pharah would be if suddenly all the hit scan heroes got a 50% damage nerf or something. In Overwatch, heroes counter and enable each other, so by buffing or nerfing the wrong hero, you can create a bit of a chain reaction in which new compositions are suddenly unjustifiably strong. Of course, with the Beyblade meta, everything was playing around a nano death blossom that was supposed to annihilate the entire team, and literally the entire comp would try to fulfill that one goal. In the tank meta, Ana's healing output allowed her to enable a type of death ball composition that simply was not viable before she was introduced. What you will notice is that the search for what is meta will never stop. Players will always try to find the easiest way to win their matches. Triple tank could have possibly also worked during the Beyblade meta, however, if something else is objectively more effective, players often won't even try to find something else as long as the first tactic still works. So more often than not, meta play is not born in the creativity of a player or community, but more out of a sense for convenience and laziness. If it was about creativity, we'd constantly try to one-up each other by coming up with a new meta that can beat the previous one. Instead, we're just hanging on to what's still working until it inevitably gets nerfed or something else gets buffed and catches our attention. In Overwatch, we don't create a new meta in order to counter another, but rather out of necessity because the previous one has been shattered by a balance patch. Pro players, of course, are a different story entirely. In an attempt to always have the edge, they actually go out of their way to come up with countermeasures that we ladder players often try to adapt in our own matches. And this is why I believe the Overwatch League is so important for us ladder players as well, because these guys are doing the legwork for us. They show us that something is not unbeatable or make us believe that something else is even more broken or simply more effective. In our lazy nature of adapting what is most conveniently going to achieve victory, of course, we take a page out of those kinds of tournaments and eventually see our own meta evolve on ladder as well. The reason I said in the beginning that I think we're moving towards a state that I would call acceptable is because of the Overwatch League. Prior to this, all we could do was adhere to meta slavery to increase our chances for victory. Because nobody really bothered to come up with a new meta to beat the old one, we'd always just have the choice between either doing the same or putting ourselves at a disadvantage. But now that we get to watch pro play on a regular and these players have to actively compete pretty much all the time, the urge for innovation is finally there, and it's displayed more often than just once in a while during a big tournament. You see, as much as many people voice their dislike for it, we should look at pro players to get a good idea for the current state of the game. These guys literally make it their job to find the most optimal way of playing Overwatch, even if that means breaking the meta. If they run a specific hero or composition pretty much all the time, then you can bet your bucket that ladder players are going to pick up on that, whether you like it or not. But the reason they do it in the first place is because it is objectively the most effective way of playing the game, and that allows us to suggest that something is possibly too powerful. Another example would be the dive meta, something that we on ladder kinda moved past already. In pro play, dive is like the most basic kind of composition. If your team can't pull off a proper dive comp, then you should really rethink some of your choices. The reason dive is so omnipresent in pro play is because of the sheer importance of high ground play on so many maps, as well as plain and simply mobility. Mobility allows players to control the battlefield. It is because of mobility that stagger tactics work in the first place. And all that illustrates to us just how powerful these abilities are and how basic those practices should be. But because of the sheer prevalence of dive, they've also come up with an anti-dive. Now, I know that many channels love to take a look at one specific kind of composition and mark it as the new meta, which, you know, could or could not become true for us on ladder eventually. But if you ask me, we should be looking at the whole picture. We should pay attention to why they are playing those kinds of compositions, when they play them, and why they don't run them all the time. Some teams pull out the anti-dive in an attempt to counter what they believe to be the only comp that the enemy team is good at. Triple and quad tank are only run in specific circumstances on specific maps, and even without dying, pro players are swapping heroes when going from one phase of the map to another. That should teach us one thing, that instead of looking at what is most powerful in relation to wonky balance patches, we can now finally look at what is powerful in relation to their game design, considering different hero kits and the way the maps have been designed, something that I've taken a look at in my video talking about hero viability. Cover and sightlines were introduced to dictate the effectiveness of snipers. High ground often begs for mobility, and sometimes overwhelming a choke point with big HP pools is just the most effective way of approaching an objective. They show us that different strategies work on different maps, and hell, even specific parts of the maps. Sure, dive will probably always be Overwatch 101 and all of us will be advised to learn how to play and counter it, but we also have to pay attention to niche picks that work brilliantly in situations that should be obvious. If nothing else, there are only a couple of things that I really want you guys to take away from this video. Number one, players will always look for the path of least resistance. As much as you want to preach that having fun is more important, reality is that it's in our nature to look for the easiest way to win. Number two, meta play exists because it has proven to be a very effective way of playing. Even if you don't want to participate in it, knowing the meta is important to stay competitive so you know how to play against it. And number three, don't try to just copy what the pros are doing, but learn why they do it. There's a reason they don't run quad tank, Lucio, Moira on every map. Try to understand why that is. We are slowly entering an era where meta play could finally no longer solely be dictated by balance patches that make heroes broken to some capacity, but instead we might be allowed to learn what works best for each map respectively, and we can use that knowledge to come up with countermeasures as well as trying to refine it. A bunch of the metas that we went through are now viable compositions that have their use cases. Going from death ball to dive to triple and quad tank, we finally have the choice between multiple compositions rather than one that solely defines the meta. And I know that many don't like the idea of meta play period, but it is never gonna go away in any competitive game. Reality is that we are meant to swap, and if Blizzard finally manages to put hero balance into a good position, we might actually be allowed to learn how to play the game rather than defining each season by which hero was broken. And this concludes today's video on meta play in Overwatch. Again, I'm almost entirely convinced that once Mercy gets hit with the Nerf baton, something else is gonna take her place as the next broken thing. And as much as people say that pros are running the same comp in every match in the league, that's nonsense. In fact, I don't think we have ever seen that much diversity and innovation all at once. Of course, Mercy is currently broken, so that dictates a lot of the hero comps, but outside of that, we are seeing a bunch of very interesting compositions. At any rate, I'm gonna call it a day, so thank you everybody so much for watching. If you don't know what to do with your time, then what about checking out my video talking about the hype surrounding new game launches, with the specific example of Anthem. That one absolutely got the shaft because it's not an Overwatch video, so chances are that it did not even pop up in your sub box. Let me know what you think about that one if you do decide to watch it. But until then, thanks again for watching, and I hope to see you all next time.